Anita, how's your mental health?
Questionable at all times. You know this.
Yeah, how's the mental health of your children?
Also a little bit tricky. Can I tell you my experience in trying to find therapists for myself and my kids, Mel?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is how it goes. You ask around your friends and your family for a referral for somebody who's nearby. You finally find somebody who sounds like they might work for your family. You give them a call and you find out that A, they're not accepting new patients, or B, they have a huge wait list. So you start over again and you ask people if they know anybody who would be a good therapist and a good fit. Finally, you find one, you go and you meet with them and you figure out that you don't actually like them that much. But it's been so much work to find somebody who you can go to in your area that you're kind of stuck with them. Well, do you have any ideas for how to get around this?
I do, because guess what? I've actually had some therapists that I have found on my own, which involves what you're saying. Sometimes I remember one time I was like 3 hours in the bathtub on my phone looking
Yeah.
through websites. I was such a prune at the end. But I have also had the experience with working with BetterHelp. And it was like, I don't want to say too good to be true, but because it is true, but it's like amazing because I was matched with my therapist within 24 hours.
And you didn't have to go through all of that other ridiculous process of trying to find somebody. And here's the cool thing too, is if that person didn't work out for you, you can just switch and say, and it's not like you're committing to another years long search for somebody who you're going to jive with.
It's true. And I lucked out, or maybe just BetterHelp is really good at matching people together because I never had to change my therapist. I loved her. Perfect fit for me. And I know that some of our friends have used BetterHelp and they've had to change therapists, and boom, same day, you can change.
Easy peasy.
You can ghost your therapist. Get a new one.
I love this idea. BetterHelp is one of our sponsors. If you use our promo code trybetterhelp.com/WWDN, you get 10% off your first month. And we totally recommend it.
Yes, get some therapy. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN. Anita,
Yes.
I have an embarrassing story and it's my own fault. And I don't even care who knows it because, like, nothing is worse than, like, the depths of vulnerability and hell that we have lived as widows, right? So it's like, okay, this is embarrassing, but also whatever.
Yeah. Tell us the story. I mean, I know it happened already, so I still am confused about how this all happened. So
Okay, your face is so shiny, though. I can't stop looking. Can you
it's
wipe your
'cause
lip?
my lips are so chapped that I just put on chapstick because they hurt because I sunburned them.
Oh, you look like your whole face is a blister.
Really?
Well, like a blister ready to pop, or that you're from the 90s and you have like, and lip gloss came out.
No, it's just my lips are hurting me.
Okay, so your dad saved my life again. Again, because we're best friends.
For the silliest reason, tell them what you did, Mel. And tell me too, because I'm still kind of confused.
Okay, here's the deal. So last year I got a nose piercing and it's so cute. I love it. My mom hates it. Whatever. It's fine. I do what I want. And I've had a stud in it for a long time and I wanted to change it out to a little hoop. That's also very cute. So you have to find the correct millimeter of what your nostril is in the shape. And so I've been trying some different sizes and stuff like that. And so last week I thought that I found the one, because when I went to the piercing place to get it switched out initially, I think somebody was in training and they didn't even like tell me, hey, do you want to look at this and see if you like it? They just picked something for me and I didn't see it. And then I just thought, oh, they're going to make me look so cute, whatever. I get to the car and I look in the mirror and I'm like horrified. It's so big.
Oh,
So
okay.
big. And we're talking like, this is like not a septum piercing. It's just like one on the side of my nostril. So I was like, what in the world? That is so big and scary and I hate it. And I just paid $25, but I am So traumatized, I just don't even want to go back and talk about it. It's fine. I will deal with it myself. So I go home and I pull it out and I order some other sizes and I get this one that I think is my size. Now, when somebody pierced my nostril, I don't know anything like at the time, like where it should go. I'm like, please just make me look not stupid. So it looks like my nostril, even though I have small nostrils, they're kind of tall. If that even makes sense. And they're not round. I don't know. I'm blaming Sylvia because I have Sylvia's nostrils,
Okay.
which by the way, they're not even nostrils, they're like slits. Look,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I cannot breathe ever, right? Anyway, so I find this one that I think is the perfect size, except for it's a little tight. And then it's a thinner gauge because I want it to be a little finer.
A little daintier, a
And
little more
yeah.
feminine.
And you can bend it easier too and like mold it ish. Okay, well, somewhere in me doing that, me sleeping, smashing my face up, whatever, me having nostrils the size of a coin, like a, what's it called? A coin slot.
Coin slot nostrils.
I can't get it out and it's starting to like tear my piercing entry point and it's pulling on it because something happened. So I was like, well, maybe it'll be okay. So for like 4 days, I was like, I think it's okay, but I know it's not okay, but I need to take it out. But I couldn't because, like, how do you stick your fingers up your nose? And I'm like, I'm not going to go back to that place because they did me wrong before. And then I have to say, I didn't like what you did, but I tried to fix it myself. And look, I ruined it and I'm an idiot. And then I was going to be
And
like,
help me.
yeah. And then
help
they were
me.
going to be like, remember that girl that came in? She's so dumb. So I'm like, okay, this is wire, essentially. I know somebody who has lots of tools and could maybe cut it off, but it's also so close to my skin that I'm like, it might rip my thing out of my nose, like, and tear my nose. And this is like, I had woken up at like 6 that day and I'm like, oh, I can't anymore. It hurts. Like, it hurt in the night. I was like, it's time for it to come out. So I call my best friend at 7:30 because I knew he'd be awake because sometimes your mom makes him clean the house early in the morning. He told me this.
Which is
And
ridiculous.
yeah, like one time he couldn't hang out till after he cleaned the house. He's like, okay, call me after because I have these chores. Anyway, I call him. I'm like, hi, do you happen? I go, first of all, I just need you to know this is so embarrassing and it's entirely my fault and I'm an idiot, but I know you can help me. Maybe. Do you happen to have some little wire cutters that could cut a 22 gauge wire? And my nose ring is stuck on my nose and it might kill me, but it's fine. Anyway. And he's like, oh, yes, I'll be right there. I'm not kidding. 30 seconds. Because
I was emergency.
Like, I'm like, oh, Randy Randall's coming over. I got to put the dogs away. And the dogs were like not even put away by the time he came up. He was like, boom. And so he comes in and I'm like holding my nostril up, trying to pinch the dumb slit so that he can grab it. Anyway, and he cut it. And he's like, I think I got to cut it again. And, but I texted you and I was like, before he came over, I was like, I have this problem. Do you think Randy can save me? And you said, probably should not have him cut something off of your face.
She was desperate. I was also just really confused. I didn't understand how your nose ring was stuck in your nose. And I still am confused about that. But it doesn't matter.
There's lots of different kinds and styles. And the one that I had, because it was so thin and because it was one that you open up, put in, and then close it, but it doesn't clasp, that was the problem. Also, I'm an idiot. So anyway, Randy cuts it and then he's like, I think I need to cut another one. And I was like, is it going to rip off my face? He's like, no, but it'll make it easier to get out. So he did it. And then I was like, I'm so dumb and thank you so much. And he was like, there. And he gave me like a dad hug.
And then he left.
Just, yep. No words. So that's
and I think
my
he
adventure.
Told every person he knew that story, just so you know.
You know, he should have because I kind of deserve it. That was really stupid.
Oh, well, I'm glad that your nose is okay again and that you're not in a bad way.
Do you think he told his other BFF, George, down the street?
I don't know if George and he have talked because my dad's been real busy this week.
Wait,
Real busy.
real busy telling everyone about me.
No.
So wait,
He's-
who did he tell? Who do I need to like shield my face from?
I don't know actually. I
Probably just
just
your family?
maybe probably.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. They already know, Mel. They know.
Yeah, they're not surprised.
They are not surprised. Yeah.
So yeah, what's up with you?
Just living the dream. I had somebody use this phrase back to me when I explained the situation. I was like, that is the perfect name for it. She called it a grief tantrum.
Oh,
Yeah. Because I did something or I forgot to do something that really wasn't as big of a deal as being a widow made it be. Like I forgot to sign my kids up for something and the deadline had already passed. And I hadn't even talked to him about it. Like he wasn't going to feel like he was missing out. But I was like, this wouldn't have happened if Jason were alive and none of my kids are getting the experience, that other kids are getting. They don't ever get to play the sports that they were playing before because I just don't have time. I just don't have energy. I'm not keeping it together. I can't keep track of all the things that I need to do. And I just like spiraled out of control because I just felt like I was doing such a bad job because I had forgotten to do this one thing. And logically, I knew it wasn't that big of a deal. Like we were all going to be fine. We were going to survive. Our lives would not have been in any sort of peril because of this. But for some reason, it just took this oversized position in my brain. And I like cried and cried and cried all morning about it. And my kids are like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I can't tell you because I didn't want to tell them that I had forgotten, they didn't even know. So then, yeah, I'm just like, I just can't keep track of things. And also, it's kind of like I'm over the time period where people want to give me like a little extra benefit of the doubt, So that kind of feels bad too.
Mm.
Anyway, that was my big story of the week. And also just dealing with like aging parents and aging grandparents is tricky, you guys. It's a thing.
You're like sandwiched between people that need help and you need
Yeah.
help.
That's like a whole thing. Like people talk about that when you're in the years where you're still raising your own kids, but then your parents, you're having to kind of step up and do more for them. And my parents are in good shape. Like I'm not having to do much for my parents, but I do have an aging grandpa that I do a lot for. And there's been a lot of change this week in that arena, which is what my dad has been doing, is taking care of that situation.
And taking care of my situation.
But yours only took like 5 minutes and then it was done. So
yeah, true.
Yeah. So
Well,
yeah.
do you need to have a laugh? Because I have another one.
Oh gosh.
And it's not even mine. This is a
Okay.
student. And I'm like,
Oh.
okay, this is classic.
Go.
So I get a text from a student on the day of when his lesson's supposed to be. And he's in high school. Like I have a lot of like high school age boys that do jazz piano lessons. And anyway, I love this kid. He's awesome. He's such a good person and a good player. Like he's great. So um he texts me and he's like, hey, I've been throwing up all night and I'm still throwing up. So I can't make it to my lesson. Do you have any other times or days or whatever? And I was like, that's weird. Cause like if you're sick, you're just gonna be like, can I have another day, not another time today?
Oh.
So
Okay,
I was
yeah.
like, I would just like ignore it. I was like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry you are feeling sick. I hope you feel better soon. Yes, here are some other times. Never heard back from him. Then like 3 hours later, I get a text from his mom. Hey, did so and so, my son text you and tell you that he couldn't come to piano today because of his physics test after school?
What?
And I was like, well, he did text me, but he told me he couldn't come because he's throwing up. And then I was dying and I'm like, this is so funny. And she's so embarrassed. She's like, I am so sorry. That's not true. He's not throwing up. He's not sick. And I was like, it's okay. I was like, wait, of all people, like, why would you
Why?
let, like, why would you lie to me? Like, I don't care. But also, I get it. Like, I mean, we've all done it. We're like, I'm sick and I can't. But it's like, just tell me you have a test. I don't care.
I know they both seem like valid excuses.
I know. It's funny. So I was like, oh, so of course I screenshotted it and gave it to the mom. I'm like, here you go. You can deal with that. And I
She's
was
gonna
like,
use that for evidence someday.
by the way, I love him. He's such a great kid. Like, and she's like, I'm so sorry again. I'm like, it's totally okay. Like, everybody, I was like, I'm sure I've
That's
done it
funny.
8 million times. Like, we've all done it so much, you know? But that was, I've
Uh,
never had a student get busted like that. That was the best. And
it's
then,
not even, that doesn't even make sense. Okay. Yeah.
I know, isn't that weird?
Yes.
It's funny.
Um, so this week, my number 4 went back to school because he had a field trip. And he was really nervous about going back to school, but I wanted him to go because he was having a field trip, end of the year, fun stuff. And so I dropped him off and he ran across the crosswalk and then I drove home. Well, I got a phone call from the crosswalk, the crossing guard. And I didn't recognize the number, of course. So she had to call me like 3 times before I finally picked up the phone. And she's like, so I have your son here and he's really upset and he doesn't think he can go on the field trip. So I'm like, I'll be right back. So I like drove back to the school and he's in the office. And he's like, Mom, I just don't think I can do this. And I was like, what are you talking about? You're going to be fine. He goes, Mom, they're going to question me. And I'm like, who's going to question you? He's like, everybody in my class, they're going to question me. They're going to say, you shouldn't be here.
What? Why?
It was just so funny. I was
He's
like,
so
they don't
funny.
care. They don't care. They know that you had your tonsils out and they don't know when you're supposed to come back or, you're anything. So I
You
had to
know
like,
what?
what?
He should have used what my student said and
Yeah,
just
I'm
said,
throwing
I'm
up.
throwing up and I can't come.
Well, I wanted him to go because I will feel bad if he missed his field trip. So I walked him to his classroom and he would not go in. He's like, they know I'm not supposed to be here. And I'm like, you
Oh.
belong here. And finally, I had to wait for him till he got onto the bus. And like 2 seconds after being around his classmates, and they're like, hey, did you get your tonsils out? And he was like, yeah. Did it hurt? Yeah. Did you get popsicles? Yeah. And then he was totally fine. But I thought it was so
Awesome.
funny. They're going to question me. Like,
Oh.
about what?
It's so amazing to me, like his vocabulary though. Like and
And
what
what?
he says and how he puts it together. He's so funny and so smart. Like, what is he gonna end up doing?
Yeah. So then when he came back from the field trip, I said, hey, did you have fun? Yeah, he had lots of fun. Did everybody take it easy on you? And he's like, yeah, nobody took it hard on me. I was like,
Oh,
good. I'm so glad.
I vote that he has his own comedy show.
Maybe one day. Maybe one day. We'll see.
Yeah, he's pretty
Yeah.
funny. Oh, well, I'm glad he's doing better and that he got to go on the field trip. And I'm glad for
Yes.
you that he went on the field trip.
Me too. And I'm also glad for both of us that it seems like maybe it's going to stop being winter here. Maybe.
Also, wait, how did the crossing guard have your phone number?
He knows it.
Whoa!
Yeah. So he told her.
And he talks to strangers that are
Aye.
other adults. That are not
Yeah, but he knows the crossing guard well enough. She's super cute. So
Wow.
hopefully you guys are having a good spring right now if you're in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah, how are your allergies, everyone?
That's,
Ours are
that's
not
probably
good.
that's probably a topic nobody wants to talk about. Should they join the Widow Wives Club? They can talk about their allergies in there. Let's hear about your allergies, guys. All the pollen.
Oh, they're so riveting. I can't wait.
I bet if people hear this, they will open up about their allergies. I feel like
Guys, I want to know everybody's
topic.
like mucus consistency. Post about it.
It's our private Facebook group. Just make sure you answer all the questions. We really do make you answer all the questions. If you don't, we don't let you in. We're very protective. So come join us there. And it's a safe, awesome place. If you want to keep the podcast going, then check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/WWDN. We are not going to do our Patreon shout out this week. We're going to do it next week.
Yeah. We're going to see if anyone's even listening to this. It's an experiment. Also, you guys, we need your stories. We need funny stories or any stories about widowhood. We sometimes say this on the podcast, and then I think you guys hear and forget. And we also say it and forget that we said it, and then remember.
Yeah.
And then we post about it and get some, and then we remember, or we forgot. Then we forgot that we did that. And anyway, if you want to submit a story that you want us to read on the podcast, it has to be in a form that makes sense. It can't just be like, yeah, that time when somebody told me XYZ and be like 1 or 2 sentences. It has to have a beginning and a middle and an end. It doesn't have to be super long. It could be
We
like
need
a
the backstory,
paragraph.
though.
Yeah, like enough that it's like somebody would read it on a podcast. We will keep your name secret. Email us at widowwedonow@gmail.com. Or if you're in the Facebook group, you can message us. So we're collecting them. We would like to share your stories that you want to be shared. And yeah, we're all friends here with a lot of snot and mucus and allergies, maybe, except for maybe Liz
in Australia.
Yeah, Aussie widows, how are you guys doing? Buy us tacos because we're hungry. Just kidding. If you want to support the podcast, that's another way that you can do that without doing Patreon or similar. And that's buymeacoffee.com/widowwedonow. And if you don't want to do that, please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts so that we can get to everybody. That's it.
Yes, I concur. All right, let's get to the episode. This is a great one.
You're going to love Jan. Actually, her name is Nancy.
Nancy Jan. Jan Nancy.
Hi, Jan. Jancy.
Ooh.
Jancy. Hey.
That's fancy.
All right. Jancy's pretty fancy.
We're 2 young widows. I'm Anita. I don't know about...
Who knows?
We'll figure that out. You'll figure that out in editing.
Maybe. I'm just going to leave it.
I lost all control of what was happening there. We're 2 young widows. We're just trying to help you figure out widow.
Leave.
You.
We're finally going to get her name right today, Anita.
I still don't have any trust in myself to do so. I mean, it's not that hard, you guys, but it seems really hard. Okay, are you ready?
Yes. Who do we have with us today?
Jan Colarusso Seeley. Was that right?
Well done.
Yes. I've been practicing like for 3 days straight.
I noticed
really.
number 3 did a great job last week.
He did have some coaching, by the way.
Okay, all right.
Me.
Okay. I couldn't tell.
But sometimes they do that. There's a few other names that I've had a hard time with, and they just say it. And I'm like, what the heck? How come you can just say it? You guys can't even read words, and you can... It's fine. I'm not jealous or anything.
Well, now that you know how to say my name, if you want to just say Jan Seeley, that will be fine.
Okay.
Everybody, you might know that we are talking about the Patreon shout out. This is one of our Patreon patrons. So we're so glad to have her here today, except for it sucks because she's a widow like us, unfortunately for her. But we're glad to meet you. Jan, welcome.
Likewise. It's been so much fun to get to know you guys through your podcast. I've been sharing it with lots of friends and following the Facebook. And it's you guys play a really big role in a lot of people's lives. So thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Jen, tell us where you are. Where do you live?
Yeah, I live in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. Home of the University of Illinois. Joe and I moved here in 1987. We're East Coasters, and we came here to go to grad school at the University of Illinois. Joe's mom's from Chicago, so we had some friends here. The programs, I was in English and he was in computer science, were really good. And we never thought we would stay, but the longer we stayed, the more we liked it. And I have to say, it's interesting because when Joe died 10 years ago, my boys were both in California. One was a grad student and one was an undergrad, and everyone just assumed I would like pack up and move to California. And I was like, I live here. This is where I work. These are where my friends are. So I love living in a university town. It's great.
I'm glad to know that it wasn't people that just asked me if I was going to move back to my mom's house, that they asked you if you're going to move out to a whole, like to the West Coast by your sons. Like that's so random.
I feel like when you become widowed, when your person died, it's like people think of you as not a whole person anymore, right? And so you need to go somewhere to make yourself be like a real person again. You're like, oh, actually, I have a whole system here and I'm just going to stay here. Okay, Jan, you already let the cat out of the bag. You told us your person's name and you told us that you've been widowed for 10 years. So now we have to back up and we have to get a little bit more information about Joe first. Why don't you tell us about him?
So Joe is from Massachusetts, as am I, oldest of four. Great mom and dad, Shar and Bob, three siblings, two sisters and a brother. Was a pretty smart kid growing up, kind of shy, discovered as he went through high school that he was a really good athlete. He was a really good runner, kind of a late to it kind of athlete, and ended up running in college. And that's where we met. Growing up with all the Seeley kids, his dad was a math professor, and so they lived abroad several times. It's a whole family would just pick up and go live in Italy or Seattle or Mexico City. And so one of the funny things about Joe is that he started school because he was living in Italy at the time, like a year earlier than he would have. He got to his senior year and he was still a whole year young. He was going to go to Haverford College, which is where our older son ended up going. And he, like 2 weeks before he graduated, he decided, I'm going to take a second senior year, which is so crazy. And so he took a second senior year and reapplied to other schools and decommitted to Haverford College, went to a different college, and that's where we met. And then we ended up having friends who were a Haverford Bryn Mawr couple that, and his name was also Joe, and he also died. So it was like crazy symmetry between me and Jackie. But the three of them would have known each other, and I would have not. But instead, Joe deferred. He took a year off, stayed in high school for another year, took a bunch of fun classes, and then we ended up meeting. And then we ended up meeting Jackie and Joe here in Champaign-Urbana. So that was kind of fun for him.
That's crazy.
I didn't even know you could take 2 years of a senior year.
I don't think you can. It is a crazy thing. So he was super creative, very good artist. He was the editor of the Yale Daily News, had a cartoon that he did for a whole year and did a lot of political cartoons. I think his first ambition coming out of college was to try to be a political cartoonist. That's such a tiny, hard job to get. We both ended up teaching at prep schools in Connecticut. And I grew up about 20 miles from Joe, and he grew up in Newton, Mass. And then we both ended up teaching at these prep schools in Connecticut. And then we decided to go to grad school, and then we came here, and we've been here ever since. Joe thinks we met as freshmen. Obviously, he made no impression on me because I don't remember that at all. But we had mutual friends, and the cool story about this is the summer between junior and senior year, these mutual friends invited me. I think one of them had a thing for me, but I didn't have a thing for him. But I went anyway. We were going to a crew regatta, which is something that you do when you go to an Ivy League school. They have these crew regattas, and so I was, with Joe's friend, and we pull up in front of the Seeley house, which is still the Seeley house. It's this house that's over 100 years old that I've been part of for 40 years. And Joe comes walking down the walkway carrying like a basket of food. They just had his grandmother's 80th birthday. Now, his mom's turning 90 this year. So this is Grandma Bass. And he's got all this really cool signature Seeley food, is what I would say. And I remember spending the day with the two Jeffs and with Joe, and coming away from that day saying, okay, that's the guy that I want to be with. And so, but that was it. I didn't see him for the rest of the summer. And then we went back to school senior year, and we had mutual friends. And I'm thinking, my God, what do I need to do to get this guy to ask me out? He just was so chivalrous because he's still thinking that his friend Jeff has a thing for me. And then he finally called me up on April 1st of our senior year. And I remember it was like 7:00 at night. And it was April 1st. And I remember this is still when we had phones in our college dorm rooms, right? Not like now. And I remember putting my hand over the phone and turning to my best friend, Maggie, and saying, it's Joe Seeley. He wants to know if I want to go to the Da Vinci exhibit at the art museum and then get some ice cream. Do you think it's an April Fool's Day joke? And she's like, I don't know. you should go. And so our first date was on April Fools. And so that even though we were married in June, we've always treated April Fools as our joke anniversary. And the like is some year was Joe gonna say, April Fools, sorry, that was a joke the whole time.
Oh,
So from April 1st of 1982 until his passing 30 years later, we were together, which was
Oh
wonderful.
man.
Yeah, he was a real sweetie, super gentle, quiet, to my, as you can tell, more high energy. But just my biggest fan for sure.
can you guys have kids?
Yep. Two sons, and Paul was 15 when Joe got diagnosed and 17 when he died. And my older son Jake was, they're 5 years apart. So he was 17 and then, no, wait a second, would have been 20 and then 22. Jake had just graduated from college.
Are they runners also?
They are both athletes, soccer and running. Jake's more of an all sport kind of guy. Just finished a crazy e-bike Amtrak solar powered adventure from the West Coast to the East Coast.
What? Wait,
Yeah.
okay.
Anita, can I do that? Because I have an
Yes.
e-mountain bike.
Yeah.
You got to toughen up your butt first.
I'm working on it.
Jake is a lot like his dad and built like me, and Paul is more like me and built exactly like his dad. He's kind of grown body parts that are Joe's, which is a little freaky for him because sometimes I just kind of stare. He has Joe's arms and his legs and his feet and his hands. Now he does as a 27-year-old. He didn't at the time, and so it's kind of fun for me to look at him because it reminds me of his dad, but it's a little creepy for Paul, I think.
He's like, do not look at my butt, Mom. That is creepy.
No, I didn't say he had the same butt.
Okay, good.
Okay, Jan. So let's walk through kind of you're living your life. You've got these two sons. You're both what were you guys doing for jobs around the time of his diagnosis? Sometimes we assume that unless we had a huge life insurance payout, we don't really need to know anything about investments or even finances. But guess what? A little knowledge of finances is critical for all of us. Maybe your partner was in charge of that stuff, and now you find yourself making all the decisions. Maybe you're mad about that. Maybe I am. Nicole from the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast is here to help. She tackles financial literacy by telling the stories of women and widows and finance experts and shares the lessons they've learned as certified financial planners. Whether you know a lot and feel confident in your financial decisions or feel unsure about all of that stuff, there is more to learn. Listen and subscribe to the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast on all podcast platforms. This ad was paid for by Rockhouse Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor.
So Joe was he was an interface designer. It's a computer thing. So he was an app designer. I was at that time still the publisher of Marathon and Beyond magazine, which was an international running magazine for marathoners and ultramarathoners. You would have been a subscriber, Anita. By then, the Christie Clinic Illinois Race Weekend had already started as an event here in 2009. So I was kind of wearing multiple hats. So I was running a small company, and then I was also a big part of that monster 3-day running event. In 2004, Joe was diagnosed with something called aplastic anemia, which is also a bone marrow condition that we think was probably a result of a long-term use of a sulfa drug that he was taking for ulcerative colitis. So he's somebody who already had a thing for autoimmune disorders, and they don't treat that stomach disorder with sulfa drugs anymore. They can be extremely harsh on your bone marrow. And so he was diagnosed with that, and they took him off the sulfa drug, and his counts pretty much came back except for his platelets. So they kept a good eye on him. So every month or every 3 months, he'd have to go in and get a platelet count, get a blood test, and they would see that. And so in December of 2010, he was just doing his routine every 2-month blood test, and his counts were just in the toilet. And when he had aplastic anemia, we had already made a connection with the University of Chicago, which is a wonderful hospital, but it's about 150 miles up the road here from Champaign. But they're experts at it. So they said, well, all right, we'll let you go on your normal Christmas vacation to the Boston area, but if you get a fever, you need to go to the emergency room right away. So we spent the 2 weeks of that Christmas in 2010 kind of getting everything set up so that he could go right up to Chicago when we got back. And we just thought, oh, maybe the aplastic anemia was back, but he went from he just didn't feel sick at all. In fact, we had just come back from running a half marathon in Jamaica in early December. And on December 10th, found out that he had AML, which is a really bad kind of leukemia. And it was like 50% of his cells were blasts, which is the immature cells. And so I was actually away at that time, and I had to get a call, and he said, you need to sit down. And I'm like, you can just tell me. He said, no, you need to sit down, So it took me like a whole day to get home, and then, went right into the hospital. And within 2 days, he was doing treatment. And when he had the aplastic anemia, sometimes the way they treat that is with a stem cell transplant. So his siblings were tested, not his brother, because he has the same autoimmune stomach disorder that Joe does, but his two sisters were tested, and his younger sister, Mara, who's kind of an Irish twin, she's only 11 months younger than he, she was a perfect match. And so we're like, okay, yeah, we got the gold standard. So the plan was for him to be in the hospital in Chicago and get bombarded with all kinds of, chemo drugs to get the leukemia down to the point where they could, do this transplant. Yep. Okay. We're going to be in, we're going to be out. You know how that works. The chemo drugs almost kill you. There were a few episodes of that, but he ended up having a transplant in March of 2011. But he was in the hospital for 3 months, went in January and didn't come home until March. It's a long time.
Up in Chicago.
In Chicago, yeah. And, it was interesting because he started a blog while he was there, and he wrote very honestly about experience, not just his disease, but also the experience of being in the hospital. And the president of the hospital started reading it because he was writing about some things that the patient experience, not so much the medical part, but when you had to go get tested across the way and they put you in this wheelchair and they take you, the transports here was like, oh my God, oh no, like it would sometimes take 2 hours to go have a test done. And it was interesting because 6 months later he had a complete regression. The first transplant didn't work. He's back in the hospital in October of that same year to try to go at it again. And all these things changed. The food was better because he wrote about how terrible the food was. He would like order ingredients and make his own little things from his hospital bed.
Yes.
So, and they don't normally do a second transplant on somebody, but Joe came in, he was incredibly strong and healthy. He was a runner, big guy. The best part of being in the hospital was there was a treadmill on the leukemia floor, so he could walk, and he would walk around the halls of the hospital with his IV pole, and that was a kind of a hoot. But he ended up having a second transplant in December of 11. Same thing, long hospital stay. Then we had to live in Chicago. I put 35,000 miles on my car going up and back, and folks taking Joe's parents and siblings took turns being up there. And he finally came home. He was sort of granted remission status for a little bit in April and May of 2012. I like to say that if God said, "Okay, here's the deal, Joe. The bad news is I'm gonna take you, but I'll give you a couple months when you could be feeling pretty good and kind of have a slightly normal life." And I think he would have picked April and May of 2012 because it coincided with the month of our big Christie Clinic, Illinois race weekend. And he was a huge part of that. And so family would come out and the kids were here. And it was just a very joyous event for the two of us, but also our family. And then my older son's graduation, and his dad came, and we all flew, but Bob flew here and then they drove. And as Jake described, my dad might have looked a little weird in the audience, dressed in white from head to toe and different things, but just the fact that he was there was wonderful. And shortly after that, we learned that the leukemia was back. And so we attempted to do like an experimental treatment in July, and it ended up putting him into a neutropenic fever, which when you have his immune system, you immediately have to go into the hospital. And so by the time we came home in September, it was to palliative care. So basically from September of 12 until he passed in mid-October, we were on a daily diet of, go in, get the test, see what kind of, does he need red? Does he need white? What kind of blood was he going to get that day?
Does he need a Pinot
Yeah,
Grigio?
exactly, exactly. And the understanding was that at some point it would not be efficacious, that's a word, yes, for him to be getting those transfusions. And his doctor had kind of prepared me for that. And my younger son Paul's soccer team was having like a historic run. They went all the way to the state finals, and I remember being at a game and getting the call that that day's blood test had indicated that the blasts were spilling over into his bloodstream, and so we can't do any more transfusions. And I begged them, can we do one more day? Let's get him tanked up. This was on a Thursday. Can we get him tanked up? We hadn't quite finished getting a hospice care set up at home. Brought him in, and while that was happening, we did all the paperwork for hospice, and then he came home that Friday and then died the following Saturday. So I kind of, as Lucy Godley, Joe's doctor, who's a wonderful woman who I'm still in touch with, said, once that happens, it'll be like lighting a candle, and it will just slowly snuff out, and that's what happened. Yeah, he was a very brave man, and how he faced all of that. A lot of the blog was a wonderful way for him to work through all of that.
So you took his blog, and I assume after he died, you made it into a book, right?
Yeah, 3 years later.
3 years later. And I just have to tell you that I think this is so appropriate because Jan sent us a copy of her book, and the first page I opened, this is the part that I read first, and I thought that this was very appropriate. It said, "This morning I took another lengthy walk through the maze of corridors. Still haven't found the cheese."
Yeah, Joe.
And when I read that, I was like, they had cheese in the hospital. It took me a few minutes to figure out he was comparing himself to a rat, but I was like, that was rather fortuitous that was the part that I read from the very beginning.
Yeah, he started writing that blog the very first day that he went in, and it was a way for him to work through his experience, but people were following it all over the world. And so I remember people would say, well, as any cancer journey is, there's a lot of, roller coaster ups and downs. Like, well, as we would go through a different chapter, like, well, how's Joe doing? Like, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what he writes about it in the blog, honestly, because that would be how he would process it. And so, after he died, I couldn't face it at all. I just couldn't read a word of it. And then some of Joe's colleagues took that blog and they made one book out of it. And then it got me thinking. And then I made myself kind of read it, and I realized, wow, if I want to hear Joe's voice, if I want to laugh at his jokes and feel his love, I have to go to the blog. That's where it is. So that's, given my background as a publisher and know my way around, how to produce a book. Marathon and Beyond was a 6x9 book like Joe's book. I just decided I'm going to go for it. 5 years after he died, I came out with a book. And so it's called Joe's Blasts: Facing Leukemia with Courage, Hope, Humor, and Acceptance. The blog didn't have normal thing. It didn't have a preface and a foreword, and it didn't have, his illness sort of fell into 5 chapters. So I had his parents, and then 2 of his siblings, and then Jake write little 1-page introductions to each of the sort of major sections. And so it walks and talks like a real book now, as opposed to just a bunch of blog posts.
I love that you did that. How long has it been out?
January of 2018 is when it debuted. Yeah, so 4 years.
That's when I was in my bed eating pie because Scott had been dead for 2 months. I'm curious, have you had people reach out since reading the book, and how has that interaction been for you?
Yeah, it's been really wonderful. And Joe's book actually connected me to one of Joe's closest friends from college, who I didn't know because we started dating so late in our college time. And now this friend of Joe's and I have become very, very good friends. So that's kind of neat for me too. It was like finding a buried treasure, because Matt knew things about Joe that I didn't know. It's great to talk to him and to hear little Joe stories. I think the thing that people who didn't know Joe have said to me is, well, one, I know how it's going to end, but I was just so hopeful the whole time. And it is ultimately a very hopeful book, even though he doesn't make it out of the back end of the book. And they just also have said, I feel like I got to know him his essence from this book. So he really, through the blog, came alive as a person. And so that's super fun for me to know that more people know him that way. And you know, our son Jake just wrote a blog on his while he was doing his journey, and so many people said, "Oh my gosh, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It sounds like his dad."
I just was going to mention something about that. I was thinking what a gift it is to your kids and potentially your grandchildren, because, you know, when you're 15, you think you know your parents, right? You think you know everything, but you don't. And
Mhm.
I don't know if they've reached this point, but I'm sure there's going to be a point where they will treasure that like a lot. You know, that's where you get to go to ask dad questions, even though you can't ask him questions, but that's where you get to go and see his attitude and, you know, kind of who he was and how he would deal with difficult situations that they're also going to face. Maybe not in the form of cancer, but in the form of jobs and, you know, like annoying bosses and annoying kids and all of
Mhm.
the difficulties that go along with life.
Yeah, I think you're right, and you know, it is the place to hear his voice. Now, I obviously have a cell phone, but I still have the house phone because it's Joe's recording. And I know I can record that, but I actually think he calls me on it. So if the house phone
Ooh.
rings
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and it goes all the way to the voicemail message, it's Joe saying, "Hey Jan, good job getting on that podcast," because he has called so many times at times when there's no reason for the phone, because it has to ring a long time to get to the Joe message. So lots of times the house phone will ring just two or three and it'll ring off. But oh my goodness, the mystical event stuff.
Do you ever hear like static on the other end? Like,
Nah, no. But I think he's calling.
Happened once on the podcast.
Really?
yes,
We were interviewing somebody and her husband's cell phone started ringing. It was crazy. So
his phone called her phone, right? Is what it was.
something like that.
You know, I was going to say something that's pretty funny. So, this is again, running was really the thread that connected us and percolated through our lives. And, you know, we were married for 26 years, which is the number of miles in a marathon. But I was just going to say, I didn't get an engagement ring when we got engaged. We got a treadmill together.
Yes. Perfect.
Isn't that hilarious?
You know what's so funny today? Like we've been setting up the subgroups for Widow Wives Club. Anita's been doing a lot of that. And I think you guys need to have a subgroup of just runners. I guess that's Strava too.
We have a Strava group, Jan. I have a question about that. So before Joe died, you guys were really involved in this marathon. And like you said, it's not just like it's a 1 day event. It's kind of this big, huge thing. And are you what's your title in that?
I'm the director. Yeah. Yeah. It's a full time, a million hours a year, week job. Yeah.
It's called She's the Shit, Anita.
She's the shit of the race. Okay. But you did this before Joe died. And then tell me how it was returning back to that after he died, because since he was such a big runner and because this was such a big part of your life, I can imagine that it had some feelings in both directions.
You know, I have to say that the race probably saved my life. It was all good. For one, it kept me busy. I mean, remember the boys are gone now. I'm by myself. So that first fall, I'm just here by myself. And I was important for my younger son for me to say to him, because he could have gone to the U of I. And I said, "You do not need to stay here because you think I need you. You go where you want to go, and I will figure out how to pay for it," was my message. And so that first fall was hard, but this is a year-round event with, you know, staff and lots of things to do. So, and his it's funny because his sisters, one of the things that Joe did the year that he was still with us, he couldn't sort of do what he would normally do, but he could answer phones and he could pretend to be me answering emails. Um, and so ever since that year, Joe's family does still come. My kids come. Joe's dad passed away 6 years ago, but his mom still comes, and his sisters they man the hotline and the email, and they do that because it's what Joe used to do, and so it's still a source of joy and love. And I think he would be just so happy and impressed with what we've done with this event and with what I've been able to do. The year before Joe died, you know this, Anita, from, well, you do more off-road stuff, but in traditional marathons, there's often a pace team. And so our pace team is called Joe's Pacers, and they were able to make that decision. Yeah, before he died, so the last year of the race, which was 2012, he actually walked the 5K, and he walked it with my older son and his dad, and he just got in his head that he was going to try to run a little bit, and he ran and he fell. There was one medical incident in the 5K, and it was my husband Joe.
Oh
And
no.
so I'm getting all this crap from the guys like, Seeley, anyway, he finishes and his hands all bandaged up but he got to do that, which was, it meant a lot to him. And so the race continues to be just a source of joy.
I love that you had that in place already. That's so amazing.
Yeah, so he got to see that. And every year, I'm obviously at the start line. I speak to every single pacer, and they know who I am, and I always do a picture, and it chokes me up, but they're called Joe's Pacers, which is really nice. And on our website for the race, there's a page about Joe. And so, yeah, that was really sweet. The person who coordinated had that idea, and we were very touched by it.
That's so nice, because then he gets to live on through the race too, which is cool.
Absolutely.
So, Jan, you mentioned that your sons had moved out. You're a widow. Talk us through that, because you're 10 years out now, and we often say on the podcast, we can't imagine being that far out. Of course, one day we will. And you've survived, and you're here, and you're talking to us. So a lot of our listeners are not quite that far in their journey yet. So talk us through that.
Well, at first I will say, you have the inclination to think you have a spouse who's got a terminal illness, and so you have all this quote time to say all the things you want to say, and I would say we probably took good advantage of that. And being the nerd that I am, I'm reading all kinds of books to try to help me be a good partner to him. And one that I would recommend for anybody, we all have people who are dying in our presence. It's called Final Gifts. It's written by a couple of hospice care nurses. And so that was something that helped me. But I thought I was going to be okay. I've done my little bit of grieving, drip by drip by drip by drip. I was so wrong. I was so wrong. I was really unprepared by the depth of my grief in those early years, especially the first year. I don't know. I guess I thought I was stronger than that, but I was quickly swept up into a grief support group through the hospice that we were in. And again, being the nerd that I am, I'm like, okay, what book can I read? What can I do? Anything that I would do to try to actively work it. And I knew that was the only way I was going to manage it, was to just face it. I call it's like taking a fire hose to the face, right? You just have to turn toward it and get through it. And that whole first year where you every whatever the day of the week that your person died, that's a bad day, and then the date, and then the craziest thing happened to me in month 13, right? So for the previous month, but in November of 2013, so 1 year and 1 month after Joe died, I was running the Richmond Marathon with one of my closest friends. And we traveled on the day, which was the 12th of the month, the 13th of the month. Now, see, this is a good example. Sometimes I forget what day did he die. That's one thing that happens. Instead of let's see, it was 2012, October 13th, 2012. I went all the way to Richmond, and it got to be the 14th of November. And I had completely missed the anniversary date. It's like the vice grip that had been on my neck had loosened. And even now, sometimes I don't think of the day. Sometimes, though, it's so internal now that I'll feel a little like, why do I feel weird? Like, oh, yeah, it's the 13th of the month. That makes sense to me. So it's, on the one hand, you just got to keep it hanging in there. As you guys expressed in your recent podcast, the time does, it just helps you learn to navigate your feelings, as you step back 3 steps and forward 1, and you get to the point where you're like, okay, I see you, grief. I see you. I'm going to look right at you. And somehow that, neutralizes a little bit, and certain things will never lose their sharp edges, but other parts of the experience become less painful, and you remember the good. And so I'm at 10 years, and like, wow, where did 10 years go? It hit me in ways that I wasn't prepared for. I mean, I just still miss Joe every day, every day, every day. I don't see that changing.
Talk to us about loneliness. I think that this is a real big part of the widow's experience, especially as your kids start to leave, or if you don't have kids in the first place. It's
Yeah.
like your whole life just blew away, you know?
I'm super lonely. There's no two ways about it. I mean, I'm also super happy and joyful and love my friends and love doing things, but there's a sadness to me also. That it's hard. You just can't escape it.
Now, it sounds like you try and stay kind of really active and you've got like with friend groups or running groups and things like that. And I think that's great, but it doesn't take the place of Joe, does
Mm-mm.
it?
No, it doesn't. Nope. And
Mm.
I don't necessarily see that changing, so I need to just work on myself and keep trying to live positively and not focus on what I do have and what I don't have. And it's definitely hard.
So, Jan, before we hit record, you mentioned to Anita and me that just preparing for this interview kind of broke you open again. Did that surprise you? And what was that like?
I knew it was going to happen. I mean, when I go into the book, I have to be prepared for that. But I also laughed as well. We're being some of the things that he had to say were hilarious, and he loved making fun of himself. So, but it was painful to be reminded of some of the really scary parts of the 21 months, and then I made myself read the last few posts. But he wrote his last blog post a couple of weeks before he died, and he knew that we were going to have a memorial service, a celebration of life service for him about a month after he died, so that everybody could have enough time to get there. And um, I think one of the things that he said about us, he said, I've noticed the coincidence between how long we've been married, 26 plus years, and the length of a marathon, an event that has percolated through our life as a couple in the last few years has given Team J, that's what he called us, a lot of time working closely together, a source of joy. 26 plus, as many years as a marathon has miles, though it felt as easy as a 5K. If only we had been working on a 50 miler.
Oh
Wow,
man.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys,
Um,
I had a thought like while you were talking, Jan. It's so interesting when you were talking about your first part of Joe being gone, and now we're looking at where you're at now. Do you guys think that it's interesting when we're in the first fresh parts of grief, either ourselves or others are surprised when we have times where we smile? And then when you're in more of the have time and space from the death, I think it's surprising to some people that we still have sadness, quote, still have sadness,
mhm.
so
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's still kind of part of the damned if you do, damned if you don't of widowhood.
I think grief is love with no place to go. And it doesn't ever change. It doesn't. It won't change for me. It might, I mean, it won't stop. That's what I want to say, not change. It has changed. It just won't go away. And um, I think I'm pretty lucky that my friends get it. And I think big part of, and I'm very active in the grief community here in Champaign, and still go to a monthly group, and we try to do the Lord's work there with trying to educate the muggles, as you call them, to know how to behave around people in grief, because it's not, are you done? And but I have many friends who are in long marriages, and yeah, I try not to look and just feel bad, even though I do. um
So while we're talking about this, you're still going to grief groups. It's been 10 years. What do you want to say about people who use the word stuck in grief?
um well, I mean, how do you think they're using it? Do they feel like they have to get unstuck to be done with it, or
I
how are they
I feel
using
like, well, I feel like the muggle world will sometimes use that like, oh, they're stuck because they're they're still actively grieving. Yeah. And they're still reaching out to those things, and they expect you to have some, nebulous amount of time and then to be done with it.
Yeah, they're just uninformed and move on. I mean, they just don't get it.
It's interesting too. It's like, say somebody's person died of cancer or leukemia, or types of cancer or something. People don't find it strange that the family still participates in events related to that. But I think people find that it might be strange that somebody still continues to participate in the grief community, but they don't realize that it's like, we've experienced this, and so we want to give back and we want to help others. And it's one of those things like in maybe a cancer nonprofit, or a giving back situation, the same types of things are what are passed from people going through the stuff to those who have already been through it. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I love that, you guys grew up pretty much in the same block and you didn't know each other till you had this, same shared experience. And, sadly, I've had a number of close friends who have lost spouses, some mostly suddenly. And so it's good. And I always just sort of say, I'm just a little bit ahead of you, but I walk with you, because you can help make them feel less crazy, as you guys talk about.
Oh, Anita has an idea.
I have the best idea. I'm going to trademark this immediately and copyright it and sell it because it's such a good idea.
That's $800.
It's $800 to trademark these. You are now a grief pacer.
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I take it seriously. I mean, it's funny how I think fate throws you in the right path of people. And one of the things that I talked about in that good grief talk that I gave is that, I think people come into your lives when you need them. And I like to say that Joe kind of did that. But I have a friend here who we weren't close friends, but she lost her husband and bumped into her. I was over at the Y doing a tabling for our race weekend, and I had heard that her husband had died, but she stopped by to say hi, and she said the mark was like, "Well, I'm here because people are telling me I'm supposed to get some exercise. It's been 187 days. We'll see." And I thought, and then she left, and I went, "Oh my gosh, right." I mean, when somebody at that, it's kind of like when our kids are born, Anita, you know how all they are in days and months, and then be like, wait a minute, is number 4 15 or is she 16, right? You forget. It's kind of like that in terms of how we now pace off the months and the years, right? Since Jason and Scott died, you can't necessarily remember what day, at least for me, I get confused sometimes. But anyway, we bumped into each other, and then that night, we both went to that year's version of the That's What She Said show, which is where I did my good grief talk, and boom, there she was. And I said, hey, oh, and actually after I saw her at the Y, I got home and I wrote her an email and said, hey, gosh, I'm so sorry that I just was just, I know that your husband died, and do you want to get lunch? Like 1 minute later, yes, lunch, please. Right. And now we're super good friends, and it's been 4 or 5 years now for her. I forget, but so you do meet people that you can travel that road with, and those relationships are very important to all of us, as you guys know.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that I found really profound about running and kind of doing endurance type events is that there's a lot of comparisons to grief and to what we struggle with. And one of the things that I had to come to terms with early on was, in the beginning, it's like you're running a 5K, right? You're trying to do all of the things. You're trying to like you said, what book do I need to read? How am I going to do this? Let's take all the kids to therapy. Let's do all the things. And at some point in time, you realize there is no finish line. And so your pacing has to really change from the beginning to when you kind of have that realization that this is forever and I can't keep going this fast or I'm gonna explode.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was delusional when I thought that I was going to somehow cross the year 1 mark and everything was going to be boop back. And it's like, God, year 2 was worse than year 1, and it just didn't necessarily get better. Over time it did, but you do have to take a long view. And that's where, an endurance athlete like you, like me, the delayed gratification, all those things, you understand a slow and steady race type thing. I mean, I am certainly feeling blessed that, it's not as torturous as it was, right? I can listen to music. I never used to be. Poor Paul, I'd be driving him to school and I'd just be like just crying. He'd come home from school, I'd be wailing upstairs. The poor kid, I don't know what he thought
Oh.
was going on, you know. So I'm glad that those days are over, even though I can be moved to tears very quickly with the right circumstance and the right memory or whatever. And I was going to say, one of the things that has become a mantra for Joe's family and friends is this notion of enjoying the blueberries. We had a little blueberry plant out behind our house. I've about 4 years ago, I moved from our family house of 25 years to a smaller place, and so I don't have the blueberry plants anymore. But towards the end of his life, he would just go out and harvest a few blueberries and come in and put them on his cereal. And so this notion of blueberries, enjoy the blueberries, is like a battle cry of enjoy life. And so Joe is buried. Beneath a Majesty sugar maple tree in the runners park here in town, and there's a beautiful bench with a memorial bench and a plaque that has his name and his birth and death dates, and then it says, Joe wanted you to enjoy the blueberries.
Oh, Joe, you're the best. I'm so
He
glad
was,
that you haunt everybody, including Anita.
yeah, he does, and he does blueberry things too. Part of his mystical events are definitely blueberry related. Yeah.
I love it. Anita, keep an eye out.
I'm going to.
Since Joe haunted you through the book with the cheese. Jan, I have a question for you about what you want in your life moving forward.
Oh gosh.
Do you even know?
I want to continue to be the healthiest person I can be. Joe would die if he could see how much money I spend on massage and other things, you know. So no,
He earned it. You're a widow. It's, you know what? Do your thing.
I'm super, concerned about, I want my kids, I want to be, I mean, obviously you can have bad luck, and some part of cancer ultimately is luck. It's like, he had a sibling donor. He should have beaten it, but he didn't. Right. But I just want to be super happy and supportive of my life, my kids, be there for them, lead by example in terms of how I take care of myself, health and wellness. Still really love my job as the director of this big event. We're still trying to come back from the pandemic. We have 7 events, but we don't have our marathon back yet. Police shortages have continued to plague us. So we have one more year without the marathon back. Hopefully next year we will.
Okay, so wait, 2024, the marathon's back.
Hopefully. So we had as you know, the whole world of sports and the rest of the world shut down. So we were 6 weeks out from our race weekend in 2020 when the pandemic happened. And then we weren't able to have it in 21 either. We had some fun multi-month virtual events. And then last year we had our event back, but we could only have the half on down. So, and no marathon, and then again, no marathon. So, this is an event that brings 20,000 people to our community, puts in $10 million. It's a huge event.
I'm just wondering, because I'm like, do I need to come to Illinois in 2024?
You totally do. Oh, we will take care of you, Anita. We would be so honored. Yes. So I still really love that job, and I have a great staff that make it fun. And I just, being a fighter, just, we're planning in parallel, trying to get this race for this year, but then also the work that we're doing with a group called Bring Back the Marathon Coalition that's looking at what's it going to take to get that. And I'm like a dog on a bone. I'm not letting that go until and this community will not be WHOLE whole until we get that marathon back as part of our race weekend. And so super committed there. Want to just still keep being active and working out and going on fun trips, going to France in May to visit a friend, and I don't get to do a lot of races, only a couple a year. I did a half marathon in the fall. I'm going to do one in June. People think like, you run your race, don't you? I'm like, no, I don't think so.
I run it, but I don't run it.
Yeah. I end up with about, 30 miles by the end of the day. The funny thing is that they want to be able to keep in touch with me the whole time, no matter where I am. So they decided a few years ago to assign a ham radio operator to me. And I don't know if you know ham radio operators, but they tend to be a sort of specific demographic, older gentlemen.
My dad is one.
With beards. They're usually not in great shape. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. And the very first year, I just completely wore out the ham. So now I have a rotation of ham radio operators that they tag off. My ham name is Mama Bear. And so like if I have to go to a porta potty, they literally stand outside the porta potty while I wait. They're not to leave my side. So I get so much joy so much joy. It's such an honor to put this event on and to make people's dreams come true. You know this as an athlete, Anita. It is just a wonderful thing to be able to do. I'm not really totally answering your question, Mel, but I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep working, going to keep living, and honoring Joe's memory in fun ways that I can, and watching out for blueberry signs.
I love that, though, because I think a lot of people want to ask somebody, well, are you going to date again, or are you going to do this or that? And I love your answer that you want to be healthy for yourself and for your kids and for the future. And I think that that is so important because you're taking care of yourself first, So I think it's really easy to maybe lose sight of that sometimes,
It's been a huge part of my ability to deal with this. Is if I weren't an athlete, if I did not make being fit and moving an important part of my life, it would have gone badly. It is the absolute most important thing of my day. I will move everything around, whether I hardly ever don't exercise, but it might just be a walk, but I totally need it. And as we were joking, the only thing better than a day with one workout, Anita, is one with two, if you can fit it in. And it was fun working from home during the pandemic, because the time my office isn't that far away, but if I do it back and forth with some meetings, I'd probably have an extra 30, 40 minutes every day. Hey, I can go for another walk at the end of the day, And so, that part is important.
I have an idea. I think that Anita's dad should volunteer to come be one of the ham radio operators, and when Anita comes and runs it. And I will be there to film.
Jan, you don't even know what you would be in for. It would be hilarious.
You're going to love Mr. Randy Randall, is all I'm going to say. He's the best.
No, Anita, we would love to have you here.
That'd be so awesome.
It's Midwest town, super friendly. The whole community loves it. It's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday event. And so our mile event is on Thursday, our 5K is on Friday.
Oh, so and you can stack them.
You can be an I challenger or a triple I challenger, and people love that, right?
Wow.
People love their bling.
Everybody, we need somebody to watch Anita's kids for a weekend. Will you please message her? It's not going to be me.
Yeah.
We've established that. Jan, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and sharing Joe with us, and Joe's book. I have that, and I can read it. I've read a few of the pages of it, and I can just get a really intense, quick glimpse at him and know that it sucks that he's gone, because he's one of the good ones. So thank you.
He was a real gentle soul and had a wonderful way about him, and everybody who knew him loved him.
Jan said that she is willing to give away one of her books, right,
yeah.
Jan?
To be clear, it's Joe's book, but I made it happen. Yes, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. So Joe's Blast, and there is a website. It's called Joe's Blast, joesblast.com. So if you want to get one, but I'm happy to have one of your listeners get a copy. Yeah, that'd be lovely.
We have one final question, and I want to add a twist to it.
Ooh.
What is your favorite cheese, number 1, and what cheese pairs best with blueberries, number 2?
Okay.
Good one.
So I've always been a cheddar person. I just love a good hard Vermont cheddar, my New England roots. Gosh, blueberries go with everything. So how about an amazing salad with feta and blueberries, and walnuts, that would be good.
I have a third question. Can you eat cheese before a marathon?
Definitely not. You should not eat cheese. Yeah, you should.
You're
not.
welcome.
It's funny. I just had a meeting with a sponsor, and they always do a bunch of things. They wanted to switch. Instead of having oranges on the route, they wanted to have apples, because they just don't know. I'm like, we're not serving apples on. No. So no, you would want to avoid dairy, Mel, before running a marathon. So
I mean, it might be fun, but not in a good way.
No, not
for somebody.
Yeah.
Funny.
Oh, thanks so much, Jan, for joining us. We hope everybody listening has enjoyed her. You have an infectious energy, and we really appreciate you for reaching out and letting us chat with you. Make sure you check out the Widow Wives Club. It's our private Facebook group. Answer all of the questions. Make sure you've got the right Widow Wives Club. Also, if you want to keep the podcast going, check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/WWDN.
If you'd like to buy us tacos, go to buymeacoffee.com/widowwedonoww.
And until we get to talk to you again, I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Jan.
And we are 2 young widows and the newly elected grief pacer. And we are all just trying to figure out, widow,
we
do
now. This is my favorite thing to discuss with you.
Tell me, what is it?
One of my favorite things. I do enjoy tacos and cheese and dogs. This is about how you cannot pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a phone plan, especially when you're a widow, your person is dead, you might have kids, you might need another option, and you just want your phone to work, you want unlimited texting and service, and you want it to be like $25 a month.
It blows my mind that they have plans that start at $15 a month. That is so cheap. And the cool thing is it uses other 5G networks, and so you don't have to pay extra for that, and you still get great service.
Yep, Anita and I have traveled all over, and I have used my phone. So I highly recommend it. And my mom's even on it. When my dad died, we put his phone down to the cheapest plan, which is $15 a month. And I think my mom's on the $20 a month plan, and it's so worth it. It's so much cheaper than what we were all paying before. So I highly recommend it if you're on a budget or not. Who cares? Ryan Reynolds is in charge of the company, and they send you free stickers with Ryan Reynolds temporary tattoos. It's kind of the best. So if somebody wants to sign up, what can they do, Anita?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. Seriously, you guys. Such a great idea. Save yourself some money.
And if you're worried about losing data or having any changes with your phone, not going to happen. They walk you through it. Everything's fine. It's the easiest process of all time. Again, that's
trymintmobile.com/WWDN.